Jan Brewer has now tweeted a picture of her veto of the very controversial SB-1062. There it is. Of course, that is the way that we ring in a veto these days, with a good tweet of it. Now, the pressure on Jan Brewer to veto 1062 was intense, and it came not only from third-party groups, but also from the mainstream Republican establishment, or conservative establishment, who are suddenly rushing to condemn the bill, including even Fox News.
I look at this bill and I wonder whether this is a reaction, an overreaction. In the end, you know, they may have struck back in a way that's deeply offensive to many and potentially dangerous.
Basically, it allows people to discriminate.
I don't know why you would want to bring Jim Crow laws back to the forefront for homosexuals.
I mean, it sounds like the lunch counter, Juan.
Both of Arizona's U.S. senators also came out against the bill, and so has Mitt Romney, which means the Republicans' 2008 presidential nominee and its 2012 nominee both came out against it. And that was, I have to say, I think a big part of it dying today. And it's also genuinely admirable. But here's what's strange about this whole episode, particularly on this night when Jan Brewer has vetoed it. On one hand, we're seeing the Republican establishment running away from a bill that would allow private citizens to discriminate against gay people and then defend that discrimination by evoking their religious faith. A bill that is inspired in theory by the notion that, say, private photographers or bakers should be allowed to withhold their services from gay couples getting married. But under what conceivable logic is that type of discrimination by a baker or photographer outrageous and unacceptable, and yet is totally fine for the state itself to discriminate against gay people by not recognizing their marriages in the first place? Think about this. I mean, keep in mind, both of Arizona senators, John McCain and Jeff Flake, are on the record opposing marriage equality.
I believe that marriage should be between a man and a woman. I still hold to the traditional definition of marriage.
I have changed my position on other issues in my life, but on this one I had not contemplated changing my position.
Mitt Romney, who came out against this bill, has also gone on the record against marriage equality.
I believe that marriage is a relationship between a man and a woman. Other people have differing views, and I respect that, but these are very personal matters.
These positions are no accident. Opposing marriage equality is essentially mandatory if you want to be the leader of the Republican Party today. And so I'm left with the somewhat cynical interpretation that Republicans spoke out against SB-1062 because they see it as an opportunity to perform a little bit of tolerance theater, distancing themselves from some of the ugliest impulses in their base, but not accepting the obvious logic that position would lead them to. It's the logic that federal judges in 6 states now, most recently today in Texas, have accepted, that there is no constitutional justification for states to discriminate against same-sex couples who want to marry, which is to say these Republicans have been caught in a bit of a tolerance theater trap of their own creation. Joining me now, Gregory T. Angelo. He's the executive director of Log Cabin Republicans. So, Gregory, do you think there's a mismatch? Is there a mismatch between coming out against this legislation and still adhering to the view that you don't support marriage equality?
Not at all, Chris. In fact, I'm very fond of saying that liberals are never happy even when they win. And tonight is a perfect example of that. The fact that you have all of these Republicans who have come out in support of a discriminatory bill, the fact that you had a Republican governor come out and veto that bill is not enough. I have enough difficulty on the Hill right now trying to make sure when we're advocating for things like the Employment Non-Discrimination Act and employment protections for LGBT individuals, to let Republicans know that you should not and do not conflate the two issues together. Marriage equality has very little to do with whether or not a business with an obligation to provide public accommodations is allowed to discriminate against LGBT individuals simply because of religious liberty. So I do not think that there's a double standard. There's a double standard there, at least where the media is concerned.
Let's clarify this. Do you believe that the Windsor holding of the Supreme Court, which struck down the Defense of Marriage Act, do you think that was rightly decided?
Yes, we do. We've been fighting for years to overturn the entirety of the Defense of Marriage Act, not just the third section that the Supreme Court did.
Do you think the subsequent decisions that have been made by federal judges now in 6 different states that, pursuant to that decision, state bans on marriage equality are unconstitutional? Do you believe in that?
We support the constitutional right of committed same-sex couples to engage in civil marriage partnerships. We also oppose any sort of discrimination being codified into law, which is what SB-1062 would have done had Republican Governor Brewer signed it into law, which she did not tonight.
But why, well, here's my question for you. Why can't the Republican Party en masse, and ENDA is a great example, right? If it's wrong for a private wedding photographer to be allowed to discriminate against a gay couple, well, clearly it should be wrong for the employer of a wedding photographer to fire that wedding photographer because they are gay, right? That's the practice that ENDA would put an end to.
Correct.
There seems to me no gap between the logic on those two, and yet ENDA is sitting there waiting for the House Republicans to take it up and pass it. It passed the Senate.
And ENDA is sitting there having received bipartisan passage in the United States Senate with 10 Republicans voting for it. Actually, both Senators McCain and Flake, by the way, the two Republican senators who came out in opposition to SB 1062. And it's not, ENDA is not just sitting in the House of Representatives, it's moving through the House of Representatives. Since passage of ENDA in the Senate, we have had more Republicans come on board as co-sponsors of that bill. We continue to grow our business coalitions, and more Republicans continue to come out in support of ENDA. So there's momentum there. I know that this doesn't really fit with the liberal media narrative, but to say that ENDA is dead, it's not. And we should be celebrating tonight,
Gregory,
right now,
I'm celebrating.
the fact that Republicans made the difference so that SB 1062 did not become law today.
Congratulations. That's wonderful. It's great. I think we're all happy this thing died. Let's remember who passed this thing in the House and the Senate. It was the Republican Party, all right? You don't. Yes, it's great that the Republican governor went ahead and vetoed the bill passed by Republican and conservative activists in the House and the Senate that would have been discriminatory, that everybody didn't like. But the fact of the matter remains, the question is, when will the Republican Party give up the ghost on objections to marriage equality when you are seeing both public opinion and the courts moving so decisively against bans on marriage equality?
Well, Chris, let me give you some good news from tonight. I think that we have really hit a watershed moment in this movement today, specifically with Governor Brewer's veto of this bill and the fact that there has been a true emergence of common sense conservatism that has trumped people on a socially conservative ideological right that are hell-bent on sticking to an obsession with LGBT issues as a way to win elections and grow the economy. Governor Brewer clearly disagreed with both, so she vetoed the bill there. The fact that this bill moved through Arizona so quickly and that there was a pushback against that just shows me that there's a necessity for log cabin Republicans' existence, because, you know, we are not a part of this party because of its stated positions on things like opposition to marriage equality. But in spite of that, we need to keep lobbying Republicans to get on the right side of this. And I would point out that Log Cabin Republicans was founded because a former governor of California who was running for president of the United States by the name of Ronald Reagan came out against something called the Briggs Initiative, which would have made it illegal for openly gay individuals to be teachers in California public schools. He came out against it because he said it was unnecessary. You've seen a similar litany of Republicans coming out across the country against SB 1062. I see echoes of Reagan and Briggs today, and it gives me hope for the Republican Party, and it shows that I believe today it's a turning point for the GOP.
That is a very good historical precedent in both ways. One, it was precisely, I think, the best historical precedent. Two, it did not indicate any greater enlightenment on LGBT issues from President Reagan. He was right to oppose that bill in California. It was an ugly, discriminatory bill, but that did not mean or predict that President Reagan was particularly enlightened on LGBT issues. I think we'd agree. Gregory T. Angelo, Executive Director of Log Cabin Republicans. Thank you.
I disagree with you on that, but okay.
All right. Coming up.